Welcome back for the individuals who were a part of the previous webinar, and welcome to the ones that were not. Take into consideration the ones that were not present. My name is Aisha. I am a clinical psychologist, licensed clinical professional counselor with a couple decades, years of experience working and working with individuals who have experienced trauma, and I transitioned into doing trainings and workshops and counseling individuals who experience trauma in the workplace. And I also share with the last group, my favorite color is blue. I am a Libra and a plant mom, and I have an appreciation for little dogs. Specifically, I like Shih Tzus. And with that being said, let's talk about apologies. Okay, thank you for letting me know. So let's get started. Part 2, diversity in the workplace. Okay, objectives are to define diversity, which will likely be a refresher. For this group, discuss why diversity is important and why training is something that is continuous on this topic. Diversity training is a process, is not an event. Again, lifelong learning, and we'll discuss the desired behavior / appropriate behavior and how we re-educate ourselves on the things that were taught to us during childhood, which speaks to self-awareness. Okay, definition of diversity. A process of creating and maintaining an environment that naturally enables all participants to contribute to their full potential in pursuit of organizational objectives without advantaging or disadvantaging any one group. R. Roosevelt was one of the thought leaders in the diversity movement. I like little historical facts. And Mr. Thomas published 7 books, wrote numerous articles, and was a consultant for Fortune 500 companies in academia, if anyone wanted to look him up. He recently passed in, well, not recently, but he passed in 2013. So with this definition, we will discuss what the barriers are when diversity is not in place, why it's important. The world is changing. By way of technology, we are more accessible to one another. It's essentially a small world, and with technology being the way it is now, it opens us up to opportunities that we just didn't have before, opportunities for more inclusion and diversity and different perspectives. Diversity changing the face of the world with these extra opportunities and technology, we get to pull from various individuals, with various backgrounds, skill sets, various countries, states, with us working remote now, or some of us working remote or hybrid. There's all of these things that are now in place that can enhance our ability to have a diverse staff. And we discussed the new ideas and unique perspectives. Diversity It's exciting. It can be exciting once you get past the possible discomfort of initiating a conversation with someone that is different from you. It can be difficult to initiate conversations for some of us, and we have a lot of similarities just because of who we are and our communication styles. It can be difficult. So once you get past that, and not to minimize the discomfort that can come with that, but once you get past those things, it could be very exciting, especially for individuals who are interested in learning and exploring and being open to new perspectives and things and ideas. And diversity is not just a challenge for employers or employees. It impacts all of our lives. It impacts our children, our family, our friends. It extends beyond professionally. It also impacts us personally, and we'll discuss more about how it does later. And this just elaborates on diversity being a process, which is why you will have additional webinars or trainings or workshops, seminars in regards to the topic, because it's so important and it's so necessary, and things change very quickly, especially with the terminology that we use, to become more sensitive and empathetic to the all-inclusive staff that employers hope to have. And that requires us to be self-aware. That requires us to think about our biases, or biases. And an example of that, I am biased, or because I'm still working on it, because I was going to say I was, but I am still biased. I'm working on it though. So I have this thought that uh, teenagers are just silly, like just laugh at anything. Um, and I know that's not the case, but it's something that I'm working on. So when I'm in the space with teenagers, I brace myself, and I'm like, hmm, they're going to be silly. They're going to find the smallest thing funny, and I'm just preparing myself for what I'm telling myself teenagers are, which is that they're silly and they laugh at anything and they find anything funny. And that's not always the case. It's important that I know that going in about myself and the belief that I have about teenagers, because it does and can impact how I interact with them and how I engage with them, if I have this preconceived notion that all teenagers are silly and laugh at anything and think everything is funny. Now, the childhood voice, that's not one of the things that I learned during childhood, that I may have this biases toward. Well, I will say this, because of I prefer small dog. Now, I did get this as a growing up in the as a child. Some parents have a tendency to like scare their children into conforming, and as a form of discipline. So I was scared of bigger dogs. The thought was like they'll attack you, eat you, they were dangerous. So that's something that was instilled in me from childhood that I've carried, even though I think that the smaller ones are adorable and very cute, so are bigger dogs and medium-sized dogs. But because this is something that was told to me as a child, I still have that favor in my mind of small dogs over big dogs, and diversity and being self-aware in the process of continuing to grow in this area and educate yourselves is acknowledging your comfort level. It can be extremely uncomfortable for some to ask certain questions, to be curious, to want to genuinely know if I've said something offensive, if I have been offensive, please let me know. I think even to genuinely communicate that with someone is very valuable. It's saying, I don't know everything, I'm open to learning, please share. In this area, if you had a capacity to. It is not our jobs or responsibility to educate individuals at all. But if we have a capacity and this person has a genuine ask and wants to know, and you can get a sense of who is authentically asking, who does not have malintent, they really just want to know. And if you had a capacity, and I will keep saying if you had a capacity because it does require capacity to be able to educate individuals on anything, then do so. And acknowledge your comfort level, their discomfort. All of those things come into play during this process of becoming more knowledgeable in the area of diversity. Confronting the challenges of diversity, perceptual, cultural, and language barriers need to be overcome. And how does one do that? Are there strategies set in place within your employer or within your home, because this is both personally and professionally that this work is important? Are these strategies, solutions set in place personally and professionally for these barriers to be overcome? And there are times when it's as simple as remembering English is not someone's first language. I've worked in spaces where individuals may not be so nice about an email where it's a typo, a perceived typo, or the message was lost because English is not that first person's language, and the reader immediately looks at it from a place of carelessness, like they were rushing and this typo and this and this. It's as simple as this person, English is not their first language, so it's important to keep this in mind. Like, how many languages do you know? And not to mention, and if you do, that's great. And it's also even better if you can fluently write in the language that you can speak, whether that's a second, third, or fourth language, because there is a difference in writing in the way that's grammatically correct with someone who has English as their second language and not. So taking stuff like that into consideration, a lot of individuals who first language is not English they're self-conscious and they're like, Aisha, I'm worried, my clients and the staff and coworkers don't understand me. And I'm like, I understand you perfectly. But it's their own confidence and lack of self-esteem in that skill set where they may isolate themselves, they may not engage in conversations because of that insecurity. But if you're not talking to anyone about it or doing self checks, what I like to call self checks, just asking the question, you'll continue to think that I don't want to have to keep repeating myself or people are not going to understand me. And I'm like, no, that is not the case. There's not a language barrier here, even though the other person may perceive it that way. And really, the same goes with culturally. Sometimes people come in with their own stuff a lot of times and they project it on other people. Well, this person may perceive me this way because culturally that's how we're stereotyped. And it's like, well, is there any evidence to that these individuals view this way? Like what are the facts? And it's them. There's not always facts. So self-checks are important in this way. Okay, employees who refuse to accept that the social and cultural makeup of their workplace is changing. Some people just don't like change, despite it's inevitable, despite it's necessary, despite how helpful change can be in improving our lives personally and professionally. These individuals usually will say they don't like change or they don't adjust well to change, which is a weakness and something that can be strengthened, fortunately. These are things that can be worked on. We just have to be intentional in doing so and purposeful. Build a strategy to maximize the effects of diversity in the workplace. Hiring practices, affinity groups can fall up under maximizing strategies. I know affinity groups are huge in large organizations, international organizations, and small organizations. That's how helpful they are to help individuals feel a sense of comfort and community with the affinity groups, which individuals are basically linked by common purpose, ideology, or interest. And if anyone has anything to add or questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. More than diversity training, create a company culture of diversity. That would be the goal. For us to train individuals and talk about it and nothing's implemented, there's not a strategic plan, there's not any action, it's not very helpful. Uh-oh. Okay. Challenges. What are the challenges when these things are not in place? Does anybody want to speak to this? When diversity is not in place, what are the challenges that come along with that? No one? Okay. For individuals who were not on the last webinar, I informed individuals that I cold call if okay. Mark was on this list. Thank you, Mark. sense of exclusion resulting in yep, employee turnover. Yep. Thank you, Alan. Reduce productivity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, miss out on additional points of views and perspective. Like, do we really want to be around people who all think like us and the same? Even though we think we may know, we don't. Lack of alternate views and backgrounds. Yes. Okay, fun facts. Considering I like these. 76% of the population today is Caucasian. In 2050, it is projected that 52% of the US population will be Caucasian. Globalization means that we are dealing with more people of different backgrounds. And I will, okay, let me, before we get to this slide, I will give an example of a recent lack of diversity challenge. There's a law firm that I was working with that were hiring, or they are hiring, they're still in the process, are hiring paralegals. And so their goal is to be more inclusive and have a more diverse firm. And there were 7 applicants. All 7 applicants were Caucasian males. So yeah, I said, y'all gonna have to go back to the applicant pool. I'm like, this is not aligned with the way you're trying to go. With all 7 males. And so out of the 7, there were maybe half of them that had some ties to the partners in the firm. So whether that's a law school friend's child, a friend of a friend, there was some connection to the partners. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, have maybe 1 or 2 you know, that are friends of the family or your buddy's grandson or son, but there is a lot of other diverse talent and not attorneys, but paralegals who can fill the position. So that was a very recent example of the need for diversity. And also having someone to bring to their awareness, this is too uniform. This is too uniform. The perspective, the views, and it was a good thing that they brought someone to the table to be able to point that out, because sometimes, you know, it's easier to hire someone that you know, right? And you don't have to go through the hiring process. Somebody can vouch for that one, they're vetted, but not all 7. Okay, so that's my recent challenge with diversity in that way and the benefits of it. Stereotyping. What are examples of stereotyping? Does anyone want to dive into that one? Any stereotypes anybody want to throw out there about their group? Everyone within a certain group does not share the same characteristics. However, that's what stereotype definition is simplified too. A widely held, fixed, and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. Oh, yep. Thank you for that one, Corey. He's black and maybe good at sports. Thank you for that. Um, older people don't understand technology is one that I hear often. Wealthy individuals are snobs, and women are not good drivers. These are some of the things that I hear that are detrimental. Women being too bossy or emotional. Yep, as a woman leader, um, I've heard that women in leader positions are cold, which is, total opposite. Um, but yeah, those are some stereotypes. And they're detrimental because they leave no room for who we are as individuals. There's nothing about an experience with someone one-on-one that's accounted for when there's stereotypes involved. That's why it's detrimental. Using derogatory cliches that reinforce stereotypes. Mm. This would be difficult to hear in the workplace or anywhere. Um, so, does anyone want to share any derogatory cliches that may reinforce stereotypes? I've heard this a lot. Real men don't cry. Um, Men and women, some women may tell their sons, don't cry, suck it up. And again, all of these things are transferable to children because that's where these things are taught, and we start to learn these things, and then as adults, we may already be conditioned to think this way. So I want to just remind individuals again in this group, this stuff is important. This topic is important to also be mindful of what messages you are directly or indirectly giving your children. But that's a huge one, with the real men don't cry, or suck it up, don't cry, to their children. Um, I'm trying to. I really, any in the workspace right now are. Hmm. I can't really think of any in the workspace. And that's not to say that individuals are doing this a phenomenal job of not using derogatory cliches that reinforce stereotypes at work. Um, so yeah, if anybody could think of any or have heard any, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Because mine are the associated with, children, and little boys don't play with dolls, or like the color, little girls shouldn't like the color, I just say my favorite color is blue. Um, okay, so sexism, discrimination against women based on sex, which goes back to the thought that women in leadership positions don't possess the qualities, whatever, are deemed necessary to be in the leadership position. Women don't consistently possess those qualities. And are often discriminated against for hiring practices or in leadership roles. And don't let you have little children. Huge thing. Huge thing. Um, the thought is if you are a mother, you will call in more frequently, you will have more absentees. There's all of these things that feed into women being discriminated against in the workplace, which increases anxiety and increases mental health challenges with the fear of I'm going to be viewed differently if I do have to call in and take care of my child or be a caregiver to um, a whomever. There's a sense of lack in mental health around these issues of women being discriminated against at work, in addition to being a double minority. And I just addressed some of the negative impacts, both physically and mentally. So when we have high levels of stress for long periods of time, that is considered toxic stress. And when we don't put self care practices into our routine, when we're experiencing microaggressions, discrimination, stereotype, prejudices, racism, we develop physical symptoms, fatigue, headache. Sometimes our stomachs just, we have digestive challenges. Our individuals just, there's a sense of unease in our stomachs, lack of sleep, inability to go to sleep, overthinking, negative impacts mentally and physically are quite harmful. So it's really important to acknowledge these things, name them, and try to do something about them when we have control in these situations. Okay, racism, belief that a certain race or races portray undesirable characteristics. Um, this would be certain races are aggressive, certain races are abrasive, certain races lack empathy. Stereotypes within races. Prejudice, where does it come from? Anybody want to speak to that one? Thoughts about where do our prejudices come from? Which are negative attitudes towards a group. Childhood. Um, the environments that we were raised in, being conditioned that way, prejudices could come from, yeah, lack of exposure to other groups or cultures. Yep, thank you for that. Bethany, stereotypes in media. Oh, absolutely. Media. Um, are there any stereotypical TV series or any TV series that you can think of that feed into stereotypes? I know there has to be uh, some that I am not thinking about right now, but that's a good one, Mark. Thank you. Historical events can lead to prejudice and stereotypes. There was an increase in prejudice against Muslims after 9/11. Family, friends, and social groups also contribute to where our prejudices may stem from. Now, how do we deal with prejudice? When we experience it, how do we deal with prejudice? Most important thing is to name it, identify it, acknowledge it. There are times when we feel things and cannot put a feeling to them or just can't speak to it at the time. So to pause, think about the situation, and put a name to it is very helpful in coping with it and dealing with prejudice. We only can control what we can control. So remembering that, and in instances where you are in spaces where you know someone does not have the knowledge base yet, but does not have malintent, if you're not willing to bring it to their attention or educate them in the moment, you control that environment as best you can. So whether that's limiting the interaction, the meeting, whatever you need to do to feel your best in that moment, given the situation, then that's something to plan for. And an example of that I use is around the holidays. If you know there's a family member, or you know your friends and family for the most part. So there's a particular person that you know that you only have about maybe 30 minutes of, we're going to say, acceptance, because we discussed tolerance and acceptance in the last webinar. So that you have about 30 minutes of acceptance of this person before you, like, they're going to say something offensive, harmful, inappropriate. I only can give them 30 minutes. You apply that same structure to protect yourself in these situations at work whenever it's possible. Again, that could be asking someone else to sit in a meeting as a buffer until you're ready to discuss the situation, or just limiting the time that you have interactions with this person. Is that something that you think is doable, realistic in the workplace? Please let me know in the chat. And it's also important to focus on your strengths, because when you feel like you're not valued, someone says something to you purposely hurtful, you have to remember your strengths, because it does and can impact you when you're dealing with these things. And again, it's important to talk about it, whether that's with a loved one or a professional, but just to talk about it and vent. So no one has any thoughts on whether or not that's realistic or doable in the workplace to structure your interaction with this person in a certain amount of minutes, or to have someone else in the meeting? Okay. Why is self-control important? So we won't make impulsive decisions. Um, Self-control is very important, so we won't make impulsive decisions. Self-control plays a role in our decision making. The decisions that we make in the heat of the moment when we are experiencing emotions may not be the same decision that we will make when we have calmed ourselves, we have paused, and we have thought about the situation. Self-control shows that you have the ability to regulate your emotions and your behavior, which is extremely important when you're trying to get a promotion, when you are trying to be a good team player. These are things that are very important, again, professionally and personally, to exhibit self control. You're able to regulate your emotions. Extremely important. And it's healthier for us to have self control. When we have self control, we are aware of how our body is reacting, how our body is feeling, what emotions are coming up for us, what I like to call or what are termed as triggers. And so when you have self control, you are aware of what you need to do to calm yourself in that moment, whether that's to go outside, get fresh air, breathe, walk away. I keep stress balls. I love them. Uh, and just, if somebody just raises your blood pressure at work or at home or any of the daily frustrations, stress ball, tennis ball, some people roll a tennis ball under their foot, stretches at work, any of these things, whatever you do for your self care, exercise, which it's important to have self-care practices in the workplace, whether that's listening to some calming music, something on the headphones, a podcast, any of those things, forms of self-care. And it allows you to think about the situation in its entirety when you have self-control, and then come back and make the decision how you want to move forward, how you want to handle any of these things that are challenges. The human factor. We're human. We make mistakes. We say things sometimes where we're like, oops, I probably shouldn't have said that. Or that didn't come out the way I wanted it to. And it's okay to acknowledge that. It is okay to retract. Uh, there's practice that comes along with these things. I have clients that, they get upset when someone forgets their pronouns. And if I were the person that forgot someone's pronouns, I will be okay acknowledging my mistake, any discomfort, unpleasant feelings that were associated with that, acknowledging, apologizing, do better. So you won't repeat the behavior. And it can take practice because it's something new for some individuals. They're like, huh? Okay, yes, this is something important to this person. It's important for you to remember what their pronouns are. If it's important to someone else that you are in relationship with, and that is you are in relationship with your coworkers, you are coworkers, everyone, you're in relationship with someone, some just more in depth than others. It's important to them, so it should be important for you to remember those things. And so with that being said, it's not conscious. Some individuals are not consciously trying to cause harm. People are comfortable and they're familiar, and so they gravitate towards groups and individuals that they perceive to have some similarities or know have some similarities, which I call, company cliques. And you can usually identify which people are a part of certain cliques, which people choose not to be a part of those cliques. Why? Is it voluntary? Is it involuntarily? They're not a part of these groups and these cliques. That can be painful. It's like you're not a part of the cool kids. As I again use my school analogies, like that's not the I'm not a part of the cool kid group, or I'm not a part of the group, the company culture that really is this toxic work culture where you're rewarded for being depleted and not having boundaries and not taking time for yourself and self-care and taking your vacation. Some companies and businesses reward that. And if you know that that's not healthy and that's not healthy for you, that's not the way you work and operate, you can be excluded from certain things and groups and promotions and things of that nature. And so, with that being said, the goal would be to get on the scale, which means examine your attitude. The employer examines their company culture, how they view different things, how they view diversity, inclusion, self-care, equity. These are things that are necessary to do self-checks on and have strategies set in place to minimize burnout, high turnover, individuals not wanting to ask questions because they don't feel safe or valued. They could be bullied. Like, did you hear this question such and such asked? And like it didn't make sense, or it wasn't, well thought out, like whatever these things are that some individuals may say. Again, it's like this is not high school or middle school. Let's evolve. Let's talk about this. Let's talk to one another with respect and dignity. And if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it. Don't tear anyone else down. It's basic human kindness that really needs to be taken into consideration. You do not have to like these. You do not have to like all of your coworkers. Is unrealistic, but you do have to respect one another and get along in a working environment. I'm not saying you invite this person over to your place for dinner. That's great if you do have a relationship like that outside of the work environment, but just be respectful, nice, kind human beings. Or if you're just not a nice person in general, be cordial until you want to work on being a nice person. Some people don't want to be a nice person, but be cordial. Okay, we don't always intentionally make decisions because we intend to discriminate. Absolutely not. But it does not change because what one person intent was not to hurt, that the pain and hurt didn't still happen. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about that next? How are we going to prevent this from happening next? Is it conflict resolution? Is it additional trainings? A plan needs to be set in place so it doesn't continue to happen. But things that we don't talk about don't get corrected. So we have to get to a point where we're able to communicate the problems and the challenges, as uncomfortable and draining, as emotional as that can be, is necessary. Because the things that impact us at work, a lot of times when we get home, we cannot separate the two. So we may come home and be upset about something that happened at work, and not have the skill set of compartmentalizing, as I mentioned before. Who was invited to the meeting, who was at the table makes a difference. If I were not at this law firm, they would not have opened the pool back up for more, or not more, because there were no diverse candidates, but they wouldn't have opened the pool up for diverse candidates. So it's knowing there is something that needs to change and be willing to do something about it. Appropriate behavior. Okay, starts with words. We've discussed this. Um, Once you say something, you cannot take it back. However, you can self-correct, and it is a skill set to know how to properly apologize. Let me say that. Don't tell jokes that demean any group. Be nice and mindful of what you're saying about individuals, people, groups. Usually it's just jokes about any group is just inappropriate, both inside and outside of the workplace. And then it puts some individuals in the group in a place where you decide, am I going to speak up about this being inappropriate or not? Um, do not just ignore offensive comments, but become an informer or educator, be a part of the solution. That can be challenging. This is not everyone's personality to advocate, to stand up and address certain things. That can be very challenging. So the goal would be not to put individuals in these situations to have to do that. Inappropriate gestures or mocking of certain groups has the same effect. It is the adult equivalent of bullying. We've discussed that a lot of teenage behavior. Honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Inappropriate behavior can be found at all levels. It is important for all of us to set an example. This is correct. It's not, just one department, staff. Everyone can learn and should and implement best practices. Teaching children about diversity, we touched on this, why it's important for adults to have this continuous process of learning in addition to correcting our kids, our children, exposing them to different cultures and things, and being more diverse in the activities that we do or the cuisine that we eat. Maybe the television shows that they watch. And I've already touched on the importance. Diversity can be enriching and fun, and should be, to learn different perspectives and be exposed to just different things. Let your children ask the question. They may feel embarrassed, but it's important for them to understand and learn. As with anything, diversity is no different. Education and knowledge stifles discrimination. The thought is, once you know better, you do better. You take the time to educate yourself and your children. Let's see. I'm trying to see. Okay, good. I don't have to speed read that much. Where this is the last slide. Re-education. Speaking in absolutes, always or nevers, don't. Um, it's not accurate, and it just does us a disservice to speak in absolutes. A particular group, a particular person does not always do anything, nor do they never do anything. There is no all any groups does this or does that. All women are fickle. All teenager does drugs. All teenagers are silly, laugh at most things, and think everything is funny. No, they don't. We must actively work to re-educate ourselves from all of this absolute thinking. Talk about it openly, bring it to the forefront. Even There's no if. When it's uncomfortable, learn the skills to deal with prejudice, which we've discussed some of that. Diversity is about all of us and about us having to figure out how to walk through this world together. Jacqueline Woodson is the author of a children's book. And these are stats on the EAP. These things you can review in your leisure. And again, your EAP information in case you need to reach out and speak to anyone about any of these things you may or may not experience. It could be a family member also who are experiencing these things and you're hearing about it, and that's vicarious trauma. And with that being said, we are all done. Thank you for being with me during this time. Any questions or comments? And there's a survey you have. So please complete that, an evaluation. Okay, Bethany, I'm going to close out. Okay, take care, everybody. You are quite welcome.